Hello, 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 everyone. We're about to get started. Gonna wait right till 6 o'clock. Also trying to figure out how to see the chat in case anybody happens to be watching. Alrighty. Studio. Dashboard. All right. Gonna start recording. Good. Getting ready. Hello, hello, hello. All right. All right. Hello, everyone. I am Robert Evans. I am your host of The Pixel Show. And today we are going to talk about 15 of my favorite images in shows that I've put together called The Story Behind the Image. And basically, these are stories. Get this to do this. It's not working. Basically, these are stories I wanted to put together, with everybody creating content while we're all at home right now. I wanted to put together something that was easy to watch. You don't have to think too much about. Kill a half an hour of your time. I've sort of been enjoying different YouTube channels, enjoying watching Jimmy Fallon do his show from home. And I have this set. And usually 6, 8, and 8 is here with me to help me cut the show, and I've had to learn to do it on my own, and I think I'm doing an okay job of it. But let's jump into the show right away, and we're going to talk about some of the stories behind some of my favorite images that I've taken over the last 25 years. If you're new to this, first time you're here, please go back to our channel, and you can watch some of our previously recorded episodes. They're all there for you, where we talk about different Sony lenses. I am a Sony artisan of imagery, so we talk a lot about Sony here. But there's a lot of things about photography if you're not a Sony shooter that you can learn, just basic photography principles and philosophies. All right, so my first image that I'm going to share with you, this was a boudoir image that I took many years ago. Now, I don't do a ton of boudoir. A lot of the boudoir that I do has spun out of my business with my past brides. So I've done some of that. I've had friends and referrals, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. It's a lot different than my normal event, wedding, commercial type work that I do. And for me, if I'm going to do boudoir, one of the things that's super important to me with boudoir is location. I don't just want to shoot in a hotel room, so I've done a lot of people's homes. So this is a beautiful location I got to shoot at. And of course, one of the first things I noticed was this beautiful door. I definitely wanted to shoot through it. We did several images here and shot through the door. But I really like this one the most because although it's beautiful and sexy, you see the least. I think less is more when it comes to boudoir. The more mystery there is, the better. So this is one of my favorite boudoir images. Next up is an image that I took a couple falls ago. I did my own little personal trip to Door County in Wisconsin. It's a little bit just east of Green Bay. And I heard that it was very beautiful, and so I took off on my own and I went out there. This particular night, I was shooting something across the street, actually. I was shooting this building with succession of doors, and the light wasn't right and it just wasn't working. And I hear this noise behind me, and I turn around and I see this tractor. Now, one of the things that was interesting about this for me is that the tractor was yellow. You don't see too many yellow tractors, and with the late afternoon sun hitting it, I thought it went really well with the fall foliage. You know, of course, he's harvesting maybe wheat or soybeans, but that's brown, and you have the fall colors in the background and the pretty blue sky. So this was my favorite image from that trip. I probably got 7 or 8 images that I really enjoyed, but I just thought this one was unique because of the yellow tractor, and it just was sort of unexpected. Now this is a wedding image. Again, I've been shooting weddings for 25 plus years, and I'm always looking for something just a little bit different in my wedding work. And this definitely fits into that category. This was at the Gramercy Park Hotel in New York City, and as I was walking around, I saw this portrait or painting of this guy, and I saw the reflection in the background, and I knew if I put my bride into the background, that this would be kind of a very cool image. And I was right. I love it anyway. So it's just great, like, you know, sort of half the picture is on the left of the frame with his eye and his hand, and then the other half of the image is on the right with her included. Now I did take out one light bulb that was above her head, and there was a little bit of distraction in the background in that white window. That was a window looking out onto the street, and there was another like small piece of a building, so I took that out. But love this wedding image, love black and white, so this really worked. So this is the feature image right off the bat. I've always wanted to capture a picture of the eagle plucking the fish out of the lake. I live very close to a lake, and I see eagles all the time, but I've never had the opportunity. And so one morning, I was walking my kids to the bus stop, and I always keep my camera with me, especially in the spring. And I walked down to the lake, and I saw the eagle sitting across the lake in the tree, and I was like, And so I got the camera ready, and I just sort of sat there, and I waited, and it wasn't too long, maybe 10 minutes. The eagle took off out of the tree, flew around, came down, started heading down to the water, and I started clicking away. I was shooting with the Sony RX10 IV, which has a 24 millimeter to 600 millimeter lens built into it. It shoots 20 frames a second, and I just started clicking away. And I probably shot 50 frames of this image, but of course this was the best one. I got, you know, I say a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill. I got the beautiful reflection of the eagle off the lake, and the water splashing and the fish in his talons, and I couldn't have been more excited when I got this image. This was another image that I shot here in the winter. Oops, like my eagle image, I had to jump back to it. This was another beautiful image. So this image came about as a Sony artisan. Every once in a while, we get to shoot equipment right before they release it. So this was about a year or so ago when they were going to announce the 135 1.8, which is the lens, the E-mount lens from Sony that I had been hoping for. When I started shooting Sony in 2012, I was shooting A-mount. I started on an A77, and they did have a 135 1.8 and A-mount, which really reminded me of my Hasselblad days when I first started shooting weddings back in the 90s. And it reminded me of the 150 on the Hasselblad. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I want this in an E-mount lens. So anyway, this image came about shooting the 135 1.8. When Sony gives me opportunities like this, I usually like to go above and beyond the expectations. So I put this shoot together with the local bridal salon that I've done some stuff before, and some models, and we just got lucky that day, and we got a great snowstorm. This is lit with a Profoto B10 light, a little portable light. I always like a little bit of flash even when I'm outside. I want my flashed images not to look flash. And of course, with the trained eye, you know that there was flash used in this, but I like it to look natural. Even sometimes when I'm shooting location portraits outside, you know, in the summer, I will pop a little light on there with a B10 and external flash, and pop a little light in there, because it just makes the colors a little bit brighter. It kind of softens any shadows that you may have, and lots of times it puts catch lights in the eyes. So anyway, that's my little flash philosophy. This image was taken, this is 747, and this was the last flight of the 747, and the last stop that it made before Delta retired this airplane was here in Minneapolis, and we were hired to shoot photo and video of this party and sort of a part of this a milestone. This plane sort of did a few journeys to different airports around the United States, and Minneapolis was one of the last places that this plane landed. And we were fortunate enough to be able to be out on the runway in between the main active runway and the main taxiway. The airport security and the people that run the airports took us out there, and the guy even said to me, he said, you know, no photographer has ever been this close to an active runway before, so you're lucky. And what happened is the 747 pilot came in, he came down like he was gonna land, but then he flew down the entire runway about, I would say 20, 30 feet right off the runway, and then took off again sort of as like a final pass. And I was directly behind him. I shot this image with a Sony 100-400 lens, and just a beautiful image. The lines, the angle, you know, the wheels down, and you know, of a very iconic airplane. Here's another quick shot I threw in here just of the inside. I got to go inside the airplane prior to them letting the guests and the other Delta employees in, and took this kind of commercial shot. As I walked around the airplane and I was in the back, you know, I saw all the TV screens and I thought, like, wow, how beautiful is that? And how often do you get the opportunity to be in an airplane with no one in it, of course, and to do a shot like that? So I took the opportunity to take this cool image that I thought went along, and of course Delta loved it. This image is from an early destination wedding that I did in Hawaii many years ago. I believe this is film. I started shooting weddings in 1989 and switched to digital, I would say, in about 2003. But what I love about this image, like even without seeing expression or fun in a bride, it's just fun and joyful. You know, you can see a bride running on the beach, and I think what really makes it is she had a little ankle lay, which is probably why I wanted to shoot this more close up than including her in it, because I wanted to try to show that. And it was just one of the early destination weddings. Like I mentioned, it was in Hawaii, so it sort of brings back good memories for me. All right, this image. So this has a great story that goes along with it. This groom's grandmother herself was a wedding photographer, actually, in Hawaii, and he told me that she had a whole lot of questions to ask about me. I think she wanted to know, you know, she said, who is your photographer? She was asking him all these questions. He's like, she's a really tough woman, so she's probably going to be all over you and asking questions and making sure you're doing a good job. And I was like, no problem, challenge accepted. And so this image came about when, again, a little bit of luck. So we were going out to take pictures of the groom, and I had walked out the door out into this courtyard, and he had followed me, and his grandma happened to be standing right there, this, you know, beautiful older woman in this big fur coat, and they immediately hugged, and of course I was standing right there and fired off a bunch of images and captured it. And right after they hugged, you know, she heard me take the picture, and she smiled at me big, and she knew that I had caught that moment between her and her grandson, and she never said a word to me. She just smiled and walked away. So I think she was a fan from right then, knowing that I got that image for her. This image right here, this has some great memories too. This is actually the bride that introduced me to my wife at this particular wedding. Not so much why I like it, but it also has that memory. I met my wife at this wedding, this bride, Amanda, and she was just a fun, joyful, this was taken at the Wilshire Ebell Theater, which is in Los Angeles, which is ultimately where my wife and I got married, in the same place that we met. So that has kind of a cool story to it. You've seen this place in all sorts of movies and commercials. They film a ton of stuff there. You know, you've noticed it, I guess, or you've probably seen it. But it's a super great location. This is an old theater upstairs with some beautiful light. And I always, oops, sorry about that. I would always use it for portraits. They filmed Gilmore Girls there, if you're a fan of Gilmore Girls. As a matter of fact, the girl who created the show, Amy Palladino, and Dan Palladino, who are the producers, I photographed her wedding there. And that was actually kind of a fun wedding because she made us dress up in 40s costumes. So maybe in a future show I'll show you a picture of that, but I have to go find it. This image is a great image. This was, of course, taken at a wedding. These are little ring bearers, and they were out playing beanbag toss. They call it cornhole. It's another name for it. And they were just having a good time. And so one of the things I do sometimes is take risks. And I definitely took somewhat of a risk when I took this image. So, because I knelt right behind the board because I wanted to get the beanbag flying and them in the background. And as a result, I did take a beanbag in the private boy parts that did not feel very good. But I stuck it out and I got this image. I love it because you just, again, a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill. You have the beanbag on the deck of the board for context, just the perfect position of the beanbag flat, flying in the air in the right position, and them in the background just looking like they're having fun. Probably one of a more favorite candid image I've ever taken at a wedding. Another wedding image, this image I love because I love this couple. And this is the second daughter in this family whose wedding that I did. And they got married, Emily and Matt, down in Cabo. And I think what I love most about this image, I mean, we've all seen an image of a couple kissing and joyful at the end, and that's always a great moment in the wedding. But what I love about this is the composition within the image of the bridesmaids on the left and the groomsmen on the right. And it's just their hands. So it just adds that nice little subliminal touch to help tell the story of this exact moment. We've all seen it, but I just think this is kind of a very unique picture and why I loved it a lot. This image was taken in Minneapolis. This is Rena Sargentopoulos. She is a news anchor here on KARE 11 in Minnesota, which is a Channel 4 affiliate. And I did her wedding several years ago. And her husband, Scott, is really into cars. That's his thing. He actually has sold them, collects them, you name it. And they wanted to do a really unique picture with the car. So this is a Bentley. And so we did this picture on the Hennepin County Bridge in downtown Minneapolis. It's a very iconic landmark in Minnesota, well, within Minneapolis. And of course that beer sign as well, Grain Belt Beer. So we drove across the bridge, and 688, who always usually helps me do this show, is also my business partner, and we shoot weddings together, photo, video. And so he was driving, I was hanging out the back of his pickup truck, and that's how we captured this image. Now this image is such a sweet image. The story behind this, this was in Bainbridge Island in Seattle. So it's one of the little islands just off Seattle in Puget Sound. And I've also done a wedding on Vashon there over the years. But this particular image, it's just sweet. You can't always direct stuff like this. And I really like when my couples are authentic and just sort of are free to be themselves. And I really think that's important. We established that, of course, early on. I think couples hire you because they like you and they feel comfortable with you, or that's why you should hire a photographer, right? They should like your work too, but sometimes I think personality is more important than portfolio. But anyway, this couple was themselves. They were on either side of the fence. I asked him just to take her hand, and then he started drawing in her hand or tracing letters, and she was smiling. And so I just really love the composition is great. The lines of the fence moving in towards them and then fading away in the background. They're not quite centered, which is great. I don't like to center things, so they're just off center to the right. But yeah, beautiful image and beautiful couple. This is a portrait image that I had done in my studio in LA many years ago. A lot of my baby and portrait stuff sort of spun out of my wedding business. I had, a lot of my brides would come to me and asked me to do baby pictures. So there's not a lot you can do with a brand new baby. So I started doing this sort of contrasty stuff, trying to show how tiny the baby was. And so this particular image, baby was a week to 2 old, which is what I would suggest my couples bring him in. One light, black background, obviously, and having the dad hold it on his arm. The one light really helps facilitate the shadows on the dad's arm. I mean, he of course was a little bit tanner than the baby. Dad's a surfer, and the baby, you know, being fresh white skin. So it's a nice contrast. And then the one light having the different shadows on the arm, which really helps accentuate his muscles. So I just think a great, beautiful, innocent photo. One of my more favorite baby infant photos. And this is the last one. So thank you if you've hung out. Going back to the baby photo, thank you if you've hung out. So the story behind this one, this was a wedding that I did in Guatemala, in Antigua, Guatemala, many years ago with a very good photographer friend of mine, Carlos Baez. I was actually second shooting this wedding with him. And we were walking around Antigua taking pictures, but at one point I saw this black door and I asked Carlos if I could do a portrait myself, and you know, we're friends. He said, yeah, Rob, go. So I just thought this door was beautiful, and what I wanted to add to it, of course, was the movement in it. So if you see it, she's like moving. So I had her line up, and I just sort of had to pick up her dress and run a little bit, so that I would get a little movement. I was probably shooting at about a 15th of a second. That's always a good place to start if you want a little bit of movement in your images. And I think it's just a kind of a beautiful, fashiony, fine art image. So it really works for me. Probably one of my favorite black and white bride images that I've ever taken. So that's it. You guys, I appreciate you watching. This is the first time I've done this on live. This is actually the 4th episode of the stories behind the images. The first 3 I did live on Facebook, and then, but those shows are also posted on this channel. 1, 2, and 3 are posted on my YouTube page, and this is the first one that we've done live. And now I'll take this because I've recorded it, and I'll put this on the Pixel Show Facebook page. So I'm your host. I'm Robert Evans. Thank you for watching. And there's about 4 or 5 more shows to come, so look for those to come in the future.